Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this InfoSec Edge webcast on getting started in cybersecurity in 2022. My name is Jeff, and I'll be moderating the session today. Today's presentation is all about getting started in cybersecurity. Not sure if anyone on the call saw our original webcast we did back in October 2018, but that's still getting about 20,000 views every month on YouTube. So we thought it'd be good, three and a half years later to update that and take a little bit different, more hands-on approach to how to break in and learn cybersecurity. So should be some good stuff today and some live demos, Q&A, all sorts of good stuff coming up. And then, one other quick thing, we do have these free cybersecurity training resources in the related content tab. If you're watching this on demand on YouTube later, I will put these links in the description. But we have our InfoSec resources websites where people like Keatron, as you can see, he just wrote a ransomware series. We have other skills authors like Ted Harrington, just wrote a 16-part application security series. We have our YouTube channel where you'll find Keatron and other people on our podcast, things like that. And then we have our Infosec Skills monthly challenge, which is, again, completely free. There's 3 hands-on labs you can do every month. And you can win up to $1,000 in prizes just for participating and going through those labs and building your cybersecurity skills. And then we have our Infosec Accelerate Scholarship. I have a slide at that on the end, but that you can actually win lifetime access to Infosec Skills. So if Keatron puts out a course 20 years from now, you'll still have access to that. So that's a great value. The links to go ahead and apply to that is in the related content section. And then we also have some information here about Keatron's actual learning paths. I don't know if you want to call it anything particular with a couple of learning paths that you have in Infosec Skills, Keatron.
Yeah, just the Cybersecurity Foundations, incident response, and all the ethical hacking, pen testing stuff. So I have extensive libraries of courses for those paths that make up those topics.
Yeah, and we also have a free tier within Infosec Skills. So we have like 1,400 courses or so in there. But there's about 100 or so that are completely free. And so you can sign up. If you click on the Cybersecurity Foundations link, it'll prompt you to create a free account. And you can actually go through and learn some of the stuff Keatron's going to be talking about today for free. And then if you like it, you can sign up and take his other learning paths. With that, let's jump into it. We're going to start off with a few tips to get started in cybersecurity. I know Keatron, this is every time we have the CyberWork podcast with Chris Cinco and all these webinars, we always get a ton of questions about how to break into cybersecurity, how to find your career path, all those kind of things. So yeah, definitely curious to hear your insights here. So yeah, the tip here is, find your interest. That's the first tip you have. I think that's sounds easy enough, but yeah, with so many different areas within cybersecurity, like how do you recommend someone go about if they're just like, hey, I think I'm interested in cybersecurity, but now what? What do I do next?
Yeah, some of the first questions I usually ask is are you interested in doing hands-on technical stuff? Were you in the trenches, writing code or configuring firewalls or doing pen testing, trying to break into networks, leading investigations or participating in investigations when a data breach has happened? Or are you looking to be, more creating policy to help to keep these things from happening? Are you looking to manage a team? Do you come from a background where you have extensive management experience and you just want to beef up cyber enough to be able to manage a team of cyber people? I usually start with that and ask what it is you see yourself doing, what would be A, the easiest transition for you, and B, what do you want to do? Do you want to be like the hackers on TV that you see in movies and things like that, or do you just want to be someone behind the scenes managing? So I start off with something like that, and once I get a sense of what it is the person's really interested in and a little bit about what their background is, I try to give them a combination of what matches the experience that they already have and try to draw that or, map that to what it is they want to end up doing. Because it's definitely a lot easier to get in. Let's say you want to be a pen tester, but you have no hands-on technical experience. It's probably going to be an easier path, or you're going to have more success getting to that pen tester role. If you have 20 years experience managing teams, maybe you go manage a cybersecurity team and then you work your way into a pen test role or something like that. So I try to help people figure out how you can utilize what you already have to get yourself into a good role in cyber. And that's kind of like usually my spearhead approach. But then, there's a bunch of other approaches. Some people really want to start over from scratch and just build it from the ground up. And I kind of help with that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about folks who maybe don't even know like what their options are yet? I know we've spoken to you about that in the past, and one of the good piece of advice that I heard, I think it was Alyssa Knight who was on our Cyberwork podcast, and she talked about, just even when you're reading cybersecurity news, you kind of start to see like what you're gravitating to, like if you're interested in the more technical stuff like you're talking about, or the more policy stuff. So yeah, for those who are just like cybersecurity is interesting, but I don't even know like what technical paths are out there or what other paths I could take. I mean, do you have any advice for them to get started?
Yeah, for one place I would say it's good is actually our Infosec Skills. It's actually a good place to just go look around and see what's there, because the way that we've got it set up now to where you can actually just type in like cloud security or security management or pen testing, I would say something as basic as even just going, like Alyssa said, reading a few articles or just looking at the stuff you hear on the news, write down some keywords that you hear and just search for those terms in our range, and you will find related courses and related paths to that and kind of get yourself off into that rabbit hole that way. So I definitely don't want people to overthink it. Just take a quick look at what's going on in the industry. If you want to fight ransomware, just read up on ransomware, what it is, and then look at some of the like those webinars we've done on how to combat that. And we definitely touch on like some roles, like, okay, well, the security architect should have designed the network to where A, B, and C wouldn't have been able to happen so easily. So those are the kinds of things that I would say put you in a position to make a good decision jumping into it. And another thing I want to point out about that, Jeff, too, is if you just, at some point you just want to pick something, right? Because we can overanalyze to the point that we are inactive. We don't take any action because we're trying to analyze, because we feel like we have to pick the right role right out the gate. And you know what? If you pick the wrong role and you spend a month, 30 days or so trying to get into that role and you find out it's not for you, there's no shame in backing out and starting over again. And I think that's kind of part of the fear there, is we've lost the ability, or we're losing the ability to fail, right? Like to say, well, I think I want to do this. And then you spend some time doing that and you realize, that's not really what I want to do. And you back out and hit something else. I've mentored several people that came to me and said, oh, I want to be a pen tester because that's what you're most known for. And we started down that path, and a month into it or 2 months into it, they realized, this is a little more in the weeds than I kind of want to be. And I helped them back out and move into other directions. And now some of those people are very happy, making a lot of money doing the cyber roles that they want to do. So don't be afraid to pick the wrong thing. That's part of how you learn what's right for you, is picking the wrong thing. And somehow it's kind of evolved into this thing where people feel like you have to, pick the right thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just wanted to remind everyone, if you have any questions, drop them in the question panel, and we can answer your specific career questions. Keatron can throughout the webinar here. One more question on this slide. I know like we have our Infosec resources website, so if people on the call aren't familiar, resources.infosecinstitute.com. It's linked in that related content tab. We publish new articles there every day. We have our own Infosec YouTube channel where we publish 15 to 30 videos a month. So we have a lot of resources that we create, but I'm curious, Keatron, if you have any resources or website or other things that you encourage people to go to. Like I know Dark Reading's a great website for like cybersecurity news. I know like there's the CyberWire Daily podcast if you just want to get that 10 minutes recap of what's going on. Is there anything you listen to or you encourage your students to kind of check out to kind of start absorbing the cybersecurity landscape?
Yeah, so Dark Reading is definitely a good one. They just always seem to have a very rich take on whatever's going on in the industry. Like the articles there are usually, kind of full. Like you get a lot of information from those articles. I like Brian Krebs as well. Like I like to, Krebs on security. That's another one that I frequent. Probably look at it 2 or 3 times a week, because he's kind of become that reporter person that's got that pulse, that hand on the pulse. Like he's connected, to people, the insiders that, know what's going on in these organizations. And he's getting the green light to publish it. So that's another place. Krebs on Security, Dark Reading. Our Infosec resources site is good. I think our site is one of the most varied places that you can go and get stuff, right? Like if you want to see an article about how to write a buffer overflow exploit. Like you can see that on our resource site. If you want to see an article on how to deal with ransomware at a high level, you can see that on our resource site as well. So I would think for me, because I even look at our resource site from stuff that other content creators are putting out there. I was just looking at some of the cryptocurrency stuff just not that long ago that another author put on our resource site. But I would say our resource site, dark reading, and Krebs on security are probably the three that I always start with. Now, keep in mind, when I read Krebs and when I read our resource site and when I read dark reading, that will probably spin me off into going and look at 6 or 7 other locations based on some things that I see on that site. But I think those are 3 places that I always kind of start my morning off if I'm going to be looking to see what's going on.
All right, yeah, let's move on to the next slide here. Our second of the 3 tips you had was, to access free training. As we mentioned, we have our YouTube channels, we have all these different blogs, and I think it's important to mention even like just individual researchers putting out blogs or, breaking apart pieces of malware. There's so much free content from cybersecurity practitioners out there. And then, free courses like Infosec Skills has that free tier, or there's other places where you can, learn free, or we have our Infosec Skills monthly challenge where you can do those hands-on labs. But yeah, in terms of like accessing free training, is there a good place to start if you're, brand new, or and just any thoughts for where you typically guide people?
Yeah, definitely. Just any of the places, looking at some of the security authors and, people that are known in security, looking at their YouTube channels and things like that's always a good place to start, especially if you want to just kind of see, what people are doing and how they're doing it. And, again, going back to the Cybersecurity Foundations course that we have for free now on our site, my honest belief is anybody that's trying to get into cybersecurity should start with that course. Because I didn't write that to replace Security Plus or any type of entry-level security certification track. I wrote it to be kind of because there's a missing body of knowledge for people that are trying to come in. You jump into some of these entry-level courses, and I use entry-level with quotes there, and 5 minutes into it, you're lost because they've used terms like routing and, packet capture and packet analysis. And, someone that's a complete beginner has no clue what those things are, but we're using these terms in these entry-level courses as if it's secondary knowledge to everyone, and it's not. So the reason I wrote that course was to fill that gap for people so that when you do get into some entry-level course, or when you go and watch someone's YouTube channel and watch them do a hacking demo or something like that, you can actually follow along and you know what's going on, even if you can't do it. So I would say that's a good place to start. And then once you have that foundational knowledge, then go crazy on the YouTube channels and the blogs and try to do CTFs and try Hack Me and On the Wire and Over the Wire and all of these different places. Because again, if you just jump into these things, you're just not going to know where to start. I mean, people sometimes like the idea of just jumping in, head first into the deep end. I almost drowned like that when I was a kid because somebody threw me in the water and I didn't know how to swim. So, some people can figure it out. Some people will drown. So I don't think that's always the best approach. Definitely take a look at some of the entry level foundational stuff like our foundations course. And once you get that, I think we did a good job. The production team did of making it to where you can answer a lot of those questions just going through it. You will get enough exposure to topics to where you can kind of get a good feel for if it's something you want to do or not. So I would say that would be a good approach to it. But definitely take advantage of the free stuff. I would say if you haven't spent, 50 hours looking at free stuff, you shouldn't spend money yet. So that's kind of my way of looking at it. You need 50 hours of absorbing free content before you know enough to really spend money. And, 50 hours is an arbitrary number, but it's a good number to start with.
Yeah, definitely. So we have one more tip slide here on networking, and then I see we have a few questions coming in, so then we'll get to your guys' Q&A questions before we do the demos. The other tip that comes up time and time again on our podcast and all the people that we talk to about networking, and I'm always curious if you have any practical tips for networking, because everybody knows like, oh, you should network with people, and that's how you get a lot of jobs, through networking with the people and whether it's LinkedIn or in-person groups. But do you have any examples of networking that you've helped people with, or things that have just general advice to kind of make it a little more concrete?
Yeah, go to meetups. Try to go to meetups and those types of things. There's a lot of those that just pop up for people that are trying to get in, or people that are just interested. Just go to meetup.com, for example, and just search for cybersecurity, Linux, introduction to Linux, just stuff like that. And just start going to these and meeting up with people there, and you'll make those connections there. Another thing, too, is join some of the LinkedIn groups that are dedicated to cybersecurity. Jump on there and start communicating with people, start asking questions on there. And just reaching out that way. And another thing, too, is you can also reach out to organizations like Infosec, like some of the others, and just start asking, like, how do I get a mentorship? Where could I go to get someone to connect me to the right people, show me what I should be doing, show me where I should be going as far as this content. But definitely the networking is a big part. And even people that are beginners, like one of the things that I do want to say to those of us that have been in this industry for a while, because, I published my first cybersecurity hacking book in 2008, so I've been educating people for a really, really long time. But I would like to say to those of us that have been in for a while, don't be the old guy or the old lady gatekeepers that are trying to keep people out, or trying to dictate how people should be taught or the approach that people should take. I mentored someone just a couple of years ago, almost 2 years ago, and she's actually started a WhatsApp group to help other people get into cybersecurity. And even though she doesn't have a lot of experience, I encouraged that and I supported that and said, go for it, kill it. Let me know if you need any help or have any questions, because everybody that's gotten a job in cybersecurity, they can probably tell you some information that'll help you. So don't look at networking as just the thing where you're going after people like me that's been in it for 20 years. Try to network with people that just got in as well, because even though they haven't been in the industry for a while, they can probably tell you some things that maybe I couldn't even, right? I haven't had a job interview. I haven't interviewed for a cybersecurity position in a long, long time, right? Now, I go and do this kind of like as an experiment, but, I'm not out there interviewing every day. And that entry-level person that just got in, that recently went on 20 job interviews before she got that job, that person can probably give you some insight that I just don't have as an industry veteran. So, expand your idea of what networking means. It doesn't have to be you're networking with a bunch of experts.
Yeah, that's great advice. Because one thing that came up on a previous Cyberwork Live episode that we did with Jackie Olshak, she was talking about mentoring, and she really encouraged people to mentor. But a lot of the people would reach out to her, and you say they would book 3 hours on her calendar just out of the blue. She was kind of talking about some of the no-nos, I guess, when it comes to mentoring. So, like, what is a reasonable ask? If someone's coming to you and they want to connect with you on LinkedIn and ask for advice, like obviously someone like yourself has a much higher profile. That's why I think it's great to connect with some of these lower entry-level folks. But do you just have any best practices for like what is a reasonable ask as you're networking to try to get that advice?
Yeah, I would say try to get people to answer the question, your initial questions, just in a LinkedIn message or an email or something like that. Because when you ask me a question via email or via LinkedIn, and it gives me time to sit down and write like a long thought out answer, because I may not answer you that day, right? But I'll eventually get to it, and I'll sit down and take my time and answer that question. But, if you're pressuring me to like get on a Zoom call, because I do get those all the time where people saying, I need help being mentored. Here's my Zoom calendar, pick a time on it. It's like, yeah, I really don't have time to do that, especially, when they give me like these, I need to know something by tomorrow because I'm going to sign up for this class this evening, type of thing. Like, don't be that aggressive and, out of touch with reality. Most of us that are doing this at a high level are very, very busy, and we want to help you, want to give you time, but you have to be realistic in what you're asking. Just start off asking your questions via that message, and we'll eventually get to it. Like I said, we may not get to it that day or right away, but we'll eventually get to it, and you'll probably get a much better answer than a forced 10-minute Zoom call, right? So I would think that just start off that way.
All right, yeah, those are the 3 tips. Now we have a slide on common cybersecurity careers. So there's a lot of different ways you can organize cybersecurity careers, and there's different frameworks and stuff for that. But within Infosec Skills, our teams put a lot of thought, and Keatron as well, as into like these 10 common cybersecurity roles. So we can talk a little bit about this, but also we have a handful of questions that have come in related to careers. So I thought we could pause to answer a few of these. Keatron, one person is asking, what are the prerequisites to becoming a SOC analyst? And maybe could you explain what a SOC analyst is as well?
Yeah, so a SOC analyst is someone so SOC is Security Operations Center, and really what happens in there is they're like the front line to, when attacks are coming in, so data that's coming into the environment, traffic that's coming into the environment, they're kind of monitoring all that, and they're looking for malicious or things that don't quite look right. And generally the process is when they see something that doesn't look right, or they get an alert about something, they will investigate that alert or investigate that activity and decide if it warrants further investigation. And an entry-level SOC analyst just might have the role of taking alerts, filtering those out, taking the ones that are automatically known to be false positives or just a bad alert, and getting that whittled down into to things that should have action taken on it, and passing it up to a higher level SOC analyst. So if you're talking entry level, you might be doing a lot of that and getting yourself just comfortable with what that process is and learning what makes an event something that needs more investigation versus an event that you can just kind of, brush off and look at it later. And then after that, you graduate to where you're the person that's behind that, to where now you're actually looking at investigating these things a little more deeply, figuring out, what the attack is. I've got people that I've mentored over the years that send me emails every day where they've gotten an alert, or they have a piece of malware that they can't quite figure out what's going on with it. So they'll reach out to me for help, and I help them with it. But that's kind of how the progression is a SOC analyst is primarily looking at that type of thing. So I would say my only prerequisite if I'm hiring is that you have a real interest in it and you've done a little bit of homework on what a SOC analyst is and what a SOC analyst does. Maybe you've taken like some foundation course or some basic packet analysis or something like that to where you understand what the job's going to entail. And I would say that's it. I don't think you need a college degree. You don't need a certification or any of that stuff to be an entry-level SOC analyst.
Yeah, that's interesting because we have another question from Shahid who says, is it possible to get a job without a degree in cybersecurity? So, we hear that a lot from, folks like you who maybe are more enlightened, who, don't necessarily require those degrees. They're just looking for interest and passion and things like that. But, I wonder at some of these larger organizations where there's maybe more HR gatekeepers. Do you still think it's beneficial for individuals to pursue a degree in cybersecurity, or do you just have any thoughts there?
Yeah, I still, I stand firmly behind you don't need a degree. I mean, if you look at, some of the larger employers in tech like Google and Amazon, they've all dropped the bachelor's degree requirement for a lot of the technical cybersecurity jobs that they have available. And Google even said, not only do you not need a degree, but here's a free 3-month, cloud engineering training platform that we're going to give you for free. Finish this and do well on it, we'll give you a job. We'll interview you for a position doing Google Cloud Engineering. So I think, people do call us enlightened, those of us that say that, but I think bigger organizations and bigger companies are becoming more enlightened to that as well, because they're realizing that they're never going to fill the cybersecurity gap if you're expecting everyone to have a bachelor's degree. It's just not a realistic expectation. If you look at the number of people that graduate every year with a bachelor's degree, it's not even enough to put a dent in the number of cybersecurity, vacancies that are out there. So that's just an unrealistic expectation, and I think the companies are finally realizing that.
Yeah, do you think that's true for, the more senior positions as well? Because obviously, like junior SOC analyst, that's one thing. But if you're, looking at this list here and you want to become a technical security architect or a cybersecurity manager, where you're overseeing people. Do you think there's tighter requirements there within organizations about degrees?
I think it depends on the job role, right? So if we look at the jobs listed here, the first three, I would say the only ones where I commonly see people with degrees would be like information risk analyst and security manager, right? The rest of those, you could get to those points without ever having a degree. You could start, for example, as a security architect, you can start as just a entry-level security analyst and eventually become a security engineer. And, through osmosis of time and knowledge gained, you end up being a security architect because of that. Or you could, go to school and get a 4-year degree and maybe get there faster. And I think that's the real question here is, what's the fastest way to get to these job roles, right? Like for some of them, definitely having a 4-year degree in computer science or, computer engineering or something like that might get you to one of these roles a little bit quicker, or in some cases a lot quicker. But that's not to say that you have to have that degree to get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we actually have a question from Susan about transitioning into governance, risk, and compliance, or identity access management, she says. But those are, I guess, two of the areas that you called out maybe as being more beneficial to have some of that, degree knowledge, whether it's as a manager, someone more in charge of, an organization's, risk profile. So do you have any just advice for someone trying to transition into that? I mean, I guess she doesn't say what she's transitioning from, but, someone looking to get into like governance, risk, and compliance type positions, is there a good path there?
Yeah, I definitely think going to or looking at some of the free GRC webinars and things like that gives you a good idea of what the requirements are. Another thing, too, is following organizations like ISACA and organizations that are real big on governance, risk, and compliance, and looking at, what they have to offer as far as certifications, what they have to offer as far as free content and things around that, and even our stuff on GRC that we have. I would say look at the free stuff, spend 50 hours, that's my magic number, 50 hours of looking at free content around GRC and around risk management. And you can kind of get an idea of what it is you're going to, need. I mean, people are very proud of their titles and their degrees and certifications. So a lot of times what I've noticed is if you go read some of the GRC forums, people always put in their signature bars, their CISA certifications and their whatever management certifications they have. They put that in their signature bar. So you can get a good feel for what people have just from looking at things like that a lot of times, getting involved in some of the communities, going to some of the blogs and things and just seeing, what the makeup looks like.
All right. Yeah, I definitely want to save some time to go into these live demos here, which I think everyone's going to be interested in. But I do have one more question I think we can hit first. Someone's asking the starting point for someone who has no programming skills. And I know that's a common question. People are always, do I need to know programming? Am I going to be, the hacker in the hoodie typing code all day? Any thoughts on careers maybe that don't require programming, or is programming something everybody should know at some level for these different roles?
So, again, if I look at the 10 roles that we have listed here on the screen, I would say that 8 out of 10 of them can be done well without programming, without any coding experience whatsoever. When we do things like, for example, pen testing, and we do digital forensics, people that do, cloud security engineering, you don't necessarily have to come into the role knowing how to code. For example, I learned a lot of, Lambda and lots of other languages that are more cloud slanting once I got heavy in the cloud, but I didn't know those languages coming into it, right? My background was in, networking and network engineering. So I think that there's an overstatement in the industry of how much coding, or if any coding, people need to have. I don't think you need to have a coding background or any coding experience to do most of these jobs that are listed here. For secure coder, you're probably going to need some coding background, or at least a little bit of coding to get into that. Or it's going to be a much higher arc learning curve to become a secure coder from not even knowing how to code. And I don't even recommend that. It's kind of like you need to learn how to code some first, and then you can start looking at how to do it securely, to kind of put you in a better position to understand how things work. But yeah, I don't think you need a coding background to do these jobs. And I've had arguments with people on TikTok and on other forums where I'm talking about cybersecurity, where you have a lot of people in the industry, especially in the tech market. A lot of them came into that industry as developers because remember, not that long ago, if you went to work in Silicon Valley, you were almost guaranteed to be a developer, writing code for something. So a lot of these people have, over the years, graduated and become security managers and things like that. So you still have them doing a little bit of gatekeeping as to where when they interview people, they want you to have this crazy background in coding because that's the language they speak. But at the same time, if you understand what's actually going on in the industry, a lot of the people that do best in these roles don't have a coding background. And again, that's something that the industry's finally woken up and realized. I didn't come from a traditional coding background. The undergrad degree major was, computer-aided drafting, right? Like I was a pre-engineering, civil engineering was, and architecture was what I kind of was leaning towards coming out of college. So you don't have to have that background to succeed in this or, even do well and become a leader in it. I've never gotten a computer science degree, don't intend on it.
All right, well, so you don't need to code necessarily, but there are 3 skills that you say every cybersecurity pro should know, and we're going to do a demo of them as well. But did you want to, introduce them first before we jump into the demo of these 3?
Yeah, for sure. And first, I want to quantitate what know means, right? When I say need or you need to know, you need to have a hands-on understanding of what these things are. Because to me, no matter what you're doing, if you're going to be in the trenches doing pen testing, or if you're going to be a security manager managing operating systems, cloud and things like that, you need to have an idea of what it is you're managing and know how these things work. Management people that are managing security, you have to make decisions about things like what technology should we implement. And if you're 100% depending on the people that are in the trenches to tell you that without you having any knowledge whatsoever, then the question starts to become, well, what's the value of you being in that position if all you're doing is doing exactly what the people that work in the environment are telling you to do? So I believe even top-level managers should dive into this stuff a little bit so that they understand, what it is they're working with and understand what it is they're managing. I've seen in a lot of pen test meetings where we're doing our pen test final reports and things where I can see the technical engineers kind of rolling their eyes at the managers talking because they're just saying terms that they've Googled and using those terms in the wrong context and stuff like that. And all I'm saying is just don't be that manager. Don't be that manager where your team has zero respect for your knowledge of what it is you guys do every day. So even if you're a manager, you're not trying to be entry-level in cybersecurity, treat yourself like you are. Jump into this stuff and at least give yourself a base understanding so you can speak the language and actually know what you're talking about and, not just making up stuff as you go a lot of times.
Yeah, definitely. So if you're ready to do the demos, we can do that. And just a reminder that we should have about 10 minutes after the demos for some more Q&A. So we'll get to the other questions that have been submitted. And if you have any other questions about the demo or about careers, feel free to drop them in. We'll try to get as many answered as we can.
Sure, absolutely. So I will start with just basic command line, to kind of show, what that is and why that matters. And let me share my screen here to get that going for you. All right.
Perfect.
So the reason command line is still important, number one, even when you go to something as new as mastering cloud services and things like that, when you get to things like deploying cloud apps, at scale and things like that, those tasks become a whole lot easier when you're using command line utilities, such as if you're using Amazon, the Amazon or AWS CLI. There's a lot of tasks that you just can't do without using the command line, or you can't do them easily. But just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, if I just did something basic from the pen test world, let's just take, we always use Mississippi State, my home state, as a good demo here. So if I go out and start enumerating information about Mississippi State, and this is a big part of risk management and things like that is kind of knowing what your exposure and risk is. And this is just an exercise in seeing what's publicly exposed. All right. So doing that little command, it showed me some IP addresses that they probably own or lease. So now I'm going to take that one IP address and just say I want to look at that range. And what I'm doing here, for those of you that have no technical background, because I feel like a lot of you that are watching this don't have that, when you visit a website, let's say it's Facebook or Infosec or whatever it is, your computer sends a message to something called a DNS server, and you're asking that DNS server, what is the IP address, or think of it as a phone number of this InfosecInstitute.com website, because you can't actually go to InfosecInstitute.com. What you can go to is the IP address or phone number that is behind that InfosecInstitute.com domain name. All right. So we have to have a way to look that information up before we can get anywhere on the internet. Otherwise, we'd have these big lists of IP addresses that we'd have to put in our browsers to get places. And just to be clear, these are IP addresses that I've got listed here. And I'm giving it a range from .1 all the way to .254. So because these IP addresses change and because there's literally billions of them in front of different domains that we go to, we need a way to be able to say, hey, I want to go to Infosec. How do I get there? What's the IP address? And that protocol is DNS that does that. So when you make that query, you're actually sending a message out to a DNS server saying, where is Infosec? And then it comes back and says, oh, Infosec is at 130.18.80.1 or whatever address it happens to be at. So that process is called a forward lookup. And what I'm doing here is the opposite of that, called a reverse lookup. Whereas I can take the IP address and ask DNS the opposite question and say, what domain or host is behind this IP address? And what I'm doing is doing that in a range. I'm saying, show me the things that are behind all these IP addresses. And as you can see, it comes back and gives me a list, a huge list of things that all appear to end in msstate.edu that are behind these IPs. Now, this is where the command line becomes important, because some people will look at this and say, oh, well, I need to take that and put it in an Excel sheet and create a pivot table and write a formula in Excel to pull out this and to give me this information. You could do that and waste 10 minutes doing it. But if you truly master the command line, watch this. We can take this, write it out to a file. All right, and this just means is greater than. Again, this is very basic command line knowledge here. So writing it out to a file named msstate, if we look at that file, we can see that it contains that information. Now, all I technically need out of this file is just this part, which is a domain name or fully qualified domain name and the IP address. A quick way to get that would be to do something called grep, right? So I would grep out just the body of this data, and I can do that by noticing that PTR, for example, exists in every line that's important to me. So I just want those lines. That's called the regular expression filter that we're doing there. So I can take this data and say grep for PTR, and now I'm only left with the things that have that string in the line. Now I just have one more step. I just need to clean it up and pull out just this field right here and this field right here. And then I can do all that by simply piping this output again to awk and telling awk to print for me fields 3 and field 4. And there we have just the data that we care about. Now, all these things that you see me doing here, these are all basic command line activities. None of these are advanced command line things. These are all basic command line. And sure, it took me 2 minutes to walk you through it, but that's because I'm kind of halfway teaching it to you. But if I were doing this in practice, that command would have just looked like this. And it would have taken me literally 3 seconds. I would have taken this and just wrote this out and named it something like final, and there's the data that I care about. Now, what can I do with that data? Well, I can grep for key things, like this is a university, so faculty, right? And I get some interesting devices there. Or I could grep for Cisco. since we know that's a very popular routing and switching device. So these little things that I'm doing, it looks fast and it looks impressive, but it's really not. It's not that impressive. It doesn't require that much skill. It's very easy. I'm pretty sure I could take every one of you that's watching this webinar and have you flowing just like this within a couple of hours, because everything I've done up to this point is this very, very extremely basic Linux command line, and then knowing how to apply it and knowing how to contextualize it. That's pretty much all it is. So once you get flowing on stuff like this, once you get a little bit of practice doing it, when you're watching other people do these things, you kind of have a mental connection with what's going on. Now, maybe you won't know every command that person's doing, but you'll know some, and you'll be able to now go and research the ones that you don't know. And I think for a lot of people that are beginners, I know when I was a beginner, I would watch these impressive demos, and 99% of what was going on, I had no clue what it was. I just know at the end they got shell, they got control of something. And that was impressive to me. But breaking down these fundamentals like this and taking your time and absorbing these are what puts you in a position to be able to master those more advanced things. And a lot of people go straight to, I want to be a hacker, I want to be a pen tester, and start running these fancy tools, but you don't understand what's going on under the hood, and that's going to limit you as far as how far you can go. And at some point, you're going to feel that gap, and you'll realize that you're not where you need to be. So that's the command line, and just kind of wanted to show you what that means and why it's important, okay? Because, again, you could do this and get this information other ways, but it'd take you much longer. And if you're doing something like a security audit, a risk assessment, or even a pen test, then time is of the essence, and you don't need to spend more time than you need. You know, if it takes you 3 times as long to do the same thing as someone doing it on the command line, maybe command line is the way you should have done it. And that's not to say that command line is the best tool for everything, but it definitely is for some things. And what I want to see beginners start to be is versed on both sides of the equation, right? Now, the next thing that we want to look at, aside from that, is cloud. I'll jump into that really quickly here. All right. Now, when we look at cloud, and I'm just going to jump into one of my AWS accounts here. This might be the best demo for you, because hopefully all of you will go out and get yourself an Amazon, Google, or Microsoft cloud account. So what I'm going to do is we're going to set up a Jeff website here. I'm going to provision a machine, put a website on it, and make it say hello from Jeff at Infosec, February 15th, 2022. Within a couple of minutes, walk you through it, and then you will understand the power of cloud and why cloud services and cloud technologies are not going anywhere. And you really, if you plan to stay in cybersecurity for any amount of time over the next few years, you're going to need to marry cloud technology and cloud knowledge with whatever else it is you end up doing in cybersecurity. If you want to be an auditor, guess what? You're going to be auditing stuff in the cloud, because everybody's moving to that. If you want to be a pen tester, you're going to be pen testing stuff in the cloud. If you want to be a security manager that manages an entire security team, guess what? Half that team right now in the average enterprise company are cloud engineers or cloud security engineers. So you're going to have to learn some cloud principles no matter what. So let's go ahead and stand up a Windows server here. Let's just go with this one. Let's go with a 2016 base. And this one is free tier eligible. All right. Now I can specify how much RAM and all that I want. I'm just going to go with eight processors and 32 gigs of RAM. But one of the cloud principles that I want to show you why it's important for you to notice is because a lot of limitations and ceilings are broke. I can right now instantly build a machine. Let's just go back and show you this. I could build a machine right now if I wanted to come in here and do like a 2019 or a 2022 server. Within a matter of minutes, I could stand up a machine here with 2 terabytes of RAM or 4 terabytes of RAM right there. 128 processors, and 4 terabytes of RAM. You can't go and buy that at Best Buy. You can't even order it from Dell. You may be able to go into a data center and have it spec'd out, but it's going to cost you probably $1 million or close to it. I can build that right here and only pay by the second. If I need it for an hour, I only pay for its usage for an hour. All right. These are some of the things that you get with cloud that you can't get traditionally, because you can't get the pricing and the rapid elasticity where you can go up and down and that type thing. This is why it's a big thing. This is why companies are using it. They're saving millions, some of them billions of dollars a year. So it's a technology that you're going to need to master. Now, let me show you what I mean by that. Someone that knows nothing, I can take them in and we can spend 5 minutes and I can have you do what I'm doing here. As a matter of fact, we're going to do this on the thing I've got coming up on the weekend that we're going to do free sessions with. We're going to pick 8 processors, 32 gigs of RAM. I'm going to go to configuration details. I could pick, which virtual network in the cloud I wanted to put this in, because when you set up a cloud account, cloud providers give you your own piece of cloud. So I've got what's called a VPC, or a virtual private cloud, which basically means that Amazon has given me a small piece of their cloud and said, this is for you, Keatron. It's your virtual private cloud. Nobody else can exist in that space except for you and the stuff that you put there. So I've got several of those. So I could pick which virtual private cloud I wanted this VM to go in. I'm just going to leave it to the default one. All right. Going to add some storage really quickly here. We can have a 30 gig. We can have a 500 gig. We can make it as big as you want. I could add secondary, tertiary hard drives. I could choose whether to encrypt them or not, and I can specify the hard drive technology. If I wanted to build a really fast database that's faster than anything I could build physically, I could use some of these provision IOPS types of hard drives and set that database up on that. But we're going to stick with the original, the default here. I'm going to go to add some tags just so I can name it. Just going to give it a name tag, and I'm going to name it Jeff 2022. This way, if anything goes wrong here, it looks like Jeff was the one that did all this. Now, by default, I know some of you may not really understand firewall technologies and all that. By default, most cloud providers will give you automatic firewalls that have everything blocked. So when I just built this VM, what they did was they said, look, at a local level, we're blocking everything except for Microsoft's remote desktop protocol, which is how you're able to remote into this machine and do things to it. But every other port, every other thing is blocked. That's the only way to get in. So I say, great. I go ahead and launch it. It asks me to create a key pair. So what this basically means is we're using asymmetric cryptography. So what's happening is I've just downloaded my private key, and Amazon is maintaining a copy up in the cloud of my public key. And if you encrypt something with your private key, the only way to decrypt it is with your public key. If you encrypt something with your public key, the only way to decrypt it is with the private key. And in this case, Amazon's created a password for my server, and they've encrypted it with my public key, which means I'm the only person in the world that can decrypt it, because this key that we just downloaded only exists on my machine right now. Right? So we go ahead and view that instance. We see it right there. It's spinning up. It says pending. And once it starts, we'll very quickly give ourselves, access to it, and we can actually view it. All right, we're going to say connect here. We'll download the remote desktop client. So that's how we would be able to actually access that file or access that server. And I'm a little impatient, so I always, keep bugging it until it decides it wants to cooperate. Now, this all happens in a matter of minutes, and this is an actual server that's available now for us in the cloud that we can access at any point in time. Now, of course, I don't want to get charged for it at some point, so I'm not going to leave it running for infinity here. So now I'm allowed to upload. Remember, we downloaded that private key. I'm allowed to upload that private key, or I can go and get it and paste its contents, right here. So we could open Jeff's key here. Or we could copy it and put it in there. And I don't want to expose my private key, but basically my private key would show up here. I don't want to make that publicly available on the internet so nobody can screenshot it and copy it. But that key will then be used to decrypt the password. And now I can use that password to log into this server. And it's really as simple as that. And you can do that all within, like a minute or so. And this server can be available to anyone you want. You could stand up a database behind it and all kinds of stuff like that. Now, the other thing is operating systems. Everything that we do, all the equipment that we use runs on some type of operating system. For our data to get routed from one place to the other on the internet, it goes across routers. Those routers have an operating system. When you sit down to your computer and do things, it has an operating system, Windows, Linux, Mac, whatever. Some of you are watching this webinar via your mobile devices. If you're running an Apple device, you're running Apple iOS, right? They're all operating systems. So literally everything we do in computing probably runs on or sits on top of an operating system. And you can't possibly really understand how to secure stuff if you don't understand what it actually runs on. So those are the things that I think are the core things that you need to get your hands on and kind of start to master a little bit, just to get yourself familiar with it, because it'll make the transition into cyber a lot easier for you. And it puts you in a better position to be able to understand what you're doing when you start getting to actually securing stuff. And that's it for the demo, Jeff. I want to make sure we have some question time here.
Yeah, we had a few questions that come in. I thought maybe we could start with clarifying, the command line stuff. You were showing some kind of like reconnaissance, penetration testing type stuff. And Joseph was asking then, is penetration testing skills then a must, or, when it comes to skills that you need?
No, I mean, I just use penetration testing, or use that piece of penetration testing as an example. What I said in the beginning was, if you wanted to go and manage a bunch of cloud resources using Amazon or Microsoft, you're probably going to use that cloud services provider's command line interface to do anything at scale. So I just use the pen testing stuff as one example. Pen testing is not a must to do cybersecurity, but command line skills, if you're going to do anything hands-on, is a must. And I even think you need to get some hands-on. Like I said, if you're going to be managing, you need to have some idea of what's going on and what it looks like.
Yeah, and then we had a question from Michael related to the cloud security stuff. He says he's become more interested in cloud security as he digs deeper into cybersecurity. So is it best to pick a single vendor like AWS, Azure, or GCP and become an expert, in that one technology, or should he try to learn, all the different ones? From what he's looked at, it looks like the core concepts are pretty transferable.
Yeah, the core concepts are transferable, and what I would say is, the way I did it was start with the entry-level Amazon, Azure, and Google. Those are like the three main ones. Start with the entry-level versions of those, go in and kind of study those and get an idea of those. And then as you start to get into the professional level certs or knowledge bases, I would say tackle one at a time. Like something very simple like what I just did, build a server in AWS and make that server publicly accessible. Then learn how to do that in Google. Then learn how to do that in Azure. Do some basic stuff like that just to figure out how to do. What I always tell people is whatever you know how to do right now, learn how to do that in a cloud environment. If you know how to build a web server and make it publicly available for people, learn how to do that in a cloud environment. If you know how to set up a database, learn how to do that in a cloud environment. If you don't know how to do anything, then learn how to do that in a cloud environment. Start there with nothing and just start building all your stuff out from there. because again, you're right. Some of the knowledge is transferable, but I still think it's a good idea to have hands-on with the three major ones at least to kind of get started, and then you can pick one to go forward.
Great. Yeah, we have just a couple more questions here. Sabir is asking where IAM, Identity and Access Management roles fit in. I think he's referring to those 10 roles that we showed earlier. Does that information fit into any of these 10 in particular, or how do you see that type of skill set applying?
It can fit into a lot of them. But for example, if you look at cloud, one of the big pieces, if you take any Amazon or Microsoft or Google cloud security certification, a big piece of all of those is IAM. So it definitely, if you're going to learn how to do anything security-wise cloud, IAM is going to be a big part of it, right? So there's an entire track of just that for most cloud vendors. So definitely that's a part of it, and I would put that, in cloud as far as the stuff that I listed out here. So if you truly learn cloud and learn cloud security, you're going to learn IAM. It's just a matter of applying that to premise or to a local environment, but the concepts of what that is the same.
All right, then we have one final question before we wrap up and pick our skills winner and announce a couple other things. We have another person on the call who's an ICS engineer. They have basic experience in cybersecurity, and they're wondering, what certificate path they should follow to become an ICS cybersecurity specialist. Any advice there?
Yeah, we have a great ICS practitioner track learning path in the skills environment. I would say start there. And, it's just because there's not a lot of other good places, right, for that yet in the industry. I could say go to Hack the Box and some other places, but that stuff is not specific to ICS, right? So I would say start off looking at our ICS practitioner stuff, because it brings a lot of cybersecurity into it, a lot more than what you get from the basic standpoint. And just start looking at some of the other security roles. When we look at security and ICS, it's really not that different as far as principles, right? How you do things is different because you're dealing with sensitive physical equipment that can cause things to happen. But the core principles are the same.
All right, we only have a couple minutes left, so we wanted to just do some announcements and then pick our winner for the free year of Infosec Skills. But before we get to that, I want to let everybody know that Keatron is actually doing a live YouTube live session on February 26th at 10 a.m. Central. So if you enjoyed some of the demos and things he talked about today, be sure to sign up for that, or go to his YouTube page. And the link should be in the either in the description of this video or in the related content section. Anything you wanted to call out here in particular for this event?
Yeah, this will actually be training. So it won't be like where we just went through some stuff like we did today. I'll actually be teaching you to do the things that we just covered at a much deeper level, because I budgeted about 4 hours for this total, where we'll do like 2.5 hours of training. I'll give you like 30 minutes to do something on your own. And at the end, as a surprise, for those of you that aren't watching this, you would notice, only people watching this notice, but the last hour, I'm going to do a live Zoom integrated with the YouTube live question and answer. So the people that choose to, you can ask questions in chat and YouTube, but you can also jump into a live Zoom call and talk to me face to face and ask me questions face to face. That'll be just for the people that are subscribers. And that's one of the things. If you want to be able to ask questions and things like that, you need to subscribe to the YouTube channel when you go sign up. That way, because that's how we set it up and just kept it to where, there's some value there. For me to continue to do these things for free, I have to justify it. And part of that is just getting the counts up. I plan on doing this once a month, one Saturday per month, if I get the traction that I'm hoping to get on the 26th here.
Yeah, I think if you're on the call, I would definitely take advantage of that. 4 hours of free training from someone like Keatron is definitely worth a couple hours. So just a couple other things. We had a question come in about scholarships for displaced tech workers. So I wanted to shout out our Infosec Accelerate Scholarships, which we have 5 different categories for. As I mentioned, that's lifetime access to Infosec Skills. So, all the 1,000+ courses in there now, plus whatever we create in the future, you'll have access to. So that should be, an absolutely awesome opportunity for anyone who applies there. And we've been doing it, I think, 3 or 4 years now. And we've had, that's one of the funnest parts of my job has been interviewing some of these scholarship winners and people much, much smarter than myself. I don't know if you're aware of any scholarships or any types of other opportunities for, displaced tech workers or anyone else that you wanted to shout out, Keatron?
Not really. I am going to start researching that more. I feel like I should be putting more information out about stuff like that. And I'm working on doing some stuff like that myself as well. So we'll have some announcements in the future for that.
All right. Then last thing, just if you want to check out his free Cybersecurity Foundations or any of the other courses in Infosec Skills, have some information here. You can get certification training or just skills training, do all the labs, things like that. And then Keatron also teaches live boot camps. So I don't know if there's anything you want to mention about the live boot camps and how that's different. I believe, you teach a few of those throughout the year.
Yeah, mostly ethical hacking, advanced hacking, and the incident response and threat hunting stuff. But they're live. They're in-person live and online live. A lot of hands-on. It's about 80% hands-on, 20% lecture. And a lot of hands-on is you just doing stuff with me, watching me do things, and then repeating what I'm doing, going into the cyber range, spending some time on your own, just practicing and making sure you get solid on it. And it's a little bit different in that way, where it's a lot more hands-on. It's a lot more kind of one-on-one. All
right. And then as we wrap up, the winner for the 1-year subscription to Infosec Skills, which is valued at $599, is Anna A. from Purdue University Global. So we'll be following up with the email to you with your code to get free access for a year. But everyone else on the call, you can go and go ahead and click on that Cybersecurity Foundations link and create a free skills account, and you can browse around. And like about 130 of the courses in there are on our free tier, and all the rest you have to upgrade to a paid account to get to. But lots of free stuff to get your 50 hours, as Keatron said. With that, I know we're a few minutes over, so thank you everyone for joining us today. Big shout out to Keatron for sharing his expertise, and be sure to check out his YouTube channel for that upcoming 4-hour free training. I think that's going to be pretty awesome. As we wrap up, a short survey will appear, and we would greatly appreciate you taking just a second to fill that out, so we know if you like this webinar or what other topics you'd like to see in the future. So thanks everyone, and have a great day.